Greetings. It's 8:15 p.m. and it's early June. It's been very warm for the past few weeks. Talking 80 or more every single day. A plane up there. 80 or more every single day. And the peas did not really like that. But right after we hit into June, we got some cold nights, like 42, 43. So right when we went back into that cooler weather, the peas started to perk up because they are more of a cool weather spring crop. And you can see every single one of these white flowers is going to be a pea. And there is a small pea right there. Now, peas and beans, the more you pick them, the more they produce. So you kind of have to stay on top of them. And the garlic is putting off its scape, which can be used to make pestos, soup stock, or just sauteed as is. And each variety puts off their scape at a slightly different time. You can see some are further ahead than others. Some are, at this stage, like you probably want to pick it about at this stage. It's going to make a circle and stand completely up. Some people don't pick it until then, but I like to pick it at this kind of like young and tender stage. And you might get another little bit of regrowth, which on this scale is kind of a little bit of a pain to have to go back and re-pick, because the scape takes energy away from the bulb production. If you want me to make a deeper video on garlic scapes and talking about all that, leave it down in the comments below. But that's not what this video is about. This video is a garden tour. And so the peas are starting to produce. The garlic is going to come out in a month or so, give or take. And from these tunnels I harvest, and all the rest of my rows, I harvested 30 bags, which equaled to 15 pounds of lettuce. And you can see the next succession of Roxy lettuce starting to move forward. And these onions under this tunnel that blew up are starting to do good. And you can see these onions that I started in March and planted in April are all starting to bulk up, which is a very beautiful sight. More lettuce, more lettuce, more lettuce. This whole row is all lettuce. And I just for perspective, how quickly things grow, I harvested this lettuce on Thursday night. It is currently Tuesday, so a little bit less than a week of growth. So if you take all these lettuce that I just harvested, the 15 pounds of lettuce from, in another week, they'll put on a whole bunch more growth, and I'll be able to hit them again for another 15 pounds in theory. And then all of these Swiss chard are starting to come into a life of their own, which is a beautiful thing. And they just go the whole way down the row. My pumpkin seeds that I've direct sowed are starting to come up. This is a kale that survived when I planted it in April, so that's cool. Onions intermixed with peppers the whole way down this bed, and garlic, more garlic down this whole row, and these cucumbers are also starting to come into a life of their own, with Swiss chard down both ends of the inner beds. You can see how this garlic is much smaller than this garlic all the way down here, and that's because there are different varieties. And you can see that this garlic, oh, there's escape, but these garlic aren't putting on too many scapes yet. So give it another week or so, or a few days, and I'll have to come through and harvest scape off of every single one of these garlics, and those can either be sold as is or processed into pestos. And down this whole bed, it's really cool. Some chestnuts that I planted from seed, and then I have the other chestnuts that were gifted to me from a local foundation because they over-ordered. So I've got like 2 successions of chestnuts, 3 different varieties: QP, Ashland, and Jefferson. You can see all the chestnuts, and that's why the garlic was planted on the outer row here, to protect all of the chestnut trees from voles. And as you can see very clearly that it did work. And there was some black walnuts that were supposed to be in there too, but it doesn't seem as if the black walnuts made it. And it may not look like, well, you can see pumpkin seeds coming up. My pumpkin seeds are coming up around the whole border of the garden. And these squash that I transplanted out took a real shock. They aren't doing too well because it's been so hot. But we're supposed to get rain for the next 4 days. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So I have a feeling that everything's just gonna take off. So there's stuff planted down both of these rows, and then there's nothing in this cover crop of weeds. But there is an established bed, so row of potatoes intermixed with peas. You can see these potatoes look nice, beautiful, healthy green. And you can see that these peas are a little bit more yellow on this side because they are not getting as much water. They get full sun back out here on this northeast side all day. Sun comes up and goes over, so they're kind of getting blasted with sun all day, as to where those peas over there are in the shade, and they get the constant 24/7 flowing of the river moisture. And you can see This is a second bed of potatoes coming up. These ones aren't coming up too well yet. And then there is a third bed of potatoes, and these ones are a blue. These ones are a blue potato, and you can see I came down yesterday both of the sides of the bed and threw all the weeds on the bed for nutrients and just to give them a little bit more airflow and sunlight. So now they'll really start to take off. This is that whole bed of onions and peppers intermixed. You can see the peppers took a big shock, everything else, but this may seem a little discerning, but since it has such an established root system, once the conditions are right, these will turn into green, beautiful peppers. Believe it or not. More peas. This west side is doing a little bit better than that northeast side. A whole row of elderberry cuttings, and I'm just letting the lesser knapweed take over because it's a little bit harder to get in this bed and snip out the weeds, but the elderberry cuttings don't seem to mind. They seem to actually like it because it gives them a little bit of shade and helps the bed to retain moisture. And down this whole row is the eggplant, also stunted like the pepper, but once the conditions are right and they're all interplanted with onions, and once the conditions are right, all these eggplant, long tongue purple eggplant and Rosa Bianca eggplant and Ico peppers will all take off. There's some Jerusalem artichokes, Stampede, and red fuchsia. So it's more like Stampede, and down there is the red fuchsia. And these are 12 to 18 foot tall sunflower producing an edible tuber, and was the one of the main food staple crops for the Abenaki people, who were the natives who used to inhabit this land. Inhabitant? They were the inhabitants of this land. Anyways. And some peach tree that I grew from seed. I put in the ground with the garlic in the fall of 2022. And here we are in the spring, late spring, going into early summer of 2024. And yeah, it's going on its second year of being a peach tree. And there's another one right here in the weeds. And this elderberry from a rooted cutting that I stuck in the ground last fall. The fall of 2022. It rooted all last season, and now this year in the spring of 2024 that the cutting is rooted, it will put off up to 8 feet of growth, flower, and fruit. And there's another one right here, and there is elderberries all the way down the rest of this row that will do the same. And then after the sunchokes and the elderberries and the solo rhubarb that I planted, more onions interplanted with the peppers. There's also these raspberries that I selected locally and they put on a nice small spring crop, which then allows them to put up all of their new growth shoots, which isn't happening yet. And then they put on a really heavy fall crop in the second week of October, if everything aligns. These are all the spring crop of berries. And intermixed with some amaranth seed that I had saved over the past few years, and some of it's coming up, some of it's not. Like I said, we had that real dry period, and even though I was trying to water, it wasn't really doing too well. Raspberries. And then there's even some tomatoes. This is Lillian's yellow heirloom that I've been saving seed off of. Just saved seed off of it for 1 year, last year. And, you know, so that's kind of the whole tour. I know it looks like there's a whole bunch of weeds, but when you get a closer, deeper look, chestnut red garlic, another variety I'm adding into the 18 that I already have. So when you take a closer look, there's actually a lot here amongst all of the weeds. And weeds, the definition of a weed is a plant that you don't want there. And you can either see them as a value and a resource, or see them as a negative nuisance, which might make me a negative Nancy, and I don't want to be that. So what I was getting to is that this pretty much happens every year. All of those warm loving crops, the tomatoes, the peppers, and the eggplant, you put them out, but the soil is still too cold, even though that the temperatures outside are feeling summer-like. But it isn't really until like the second week of June that the soil becomes compatible with the root systems of those warm, loving plants. So, I hear the voles running through the potato beds, which is what I really don't want. But I did see some snakes, so hopefully, and there's garlic interplanted with the potatoes, so that's to try to help against the voles. But what I was saying is that the plants just sit there because the soil's still too cold, and since it's so hot, like 80s, almost 90, and no rain, the plants just pretty much get fried, but the root system survives. And then once the soil temperatures become compatible, it starts to shoot off all of that new growth. And since we're supposed to start going into our rainy pattern of just 1 inch tomorrow, and it's gonna rain every day after that, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, a full inch already on Thursday. So, and then if we get some sunlight after that, one sunny day after that, everything is just gonna and be growing. And cucumbers, Swiss chard, lettuce will be ready for another harvest. Scapes will be harvesting. Potatoes will be harvesting at the beginning of July, mid-July. And so even though it didn't, what I had envisioned was perfect beds, pretty much like this, with no weeds and crops planted down the whole thing, right? Like how I have this bed, 4 rows, well I guess it's 3 right here, 3 rows of lettuce all the way down this 80-foot row. I kind of envisioned that for like this whole plot, but since I did not lay the mulch thick enough, even though I kind of thought I did, a layer of grass, leaves, and then wood chips, I didn't get the last layers of wood chips on these beds because then the jumping worms were discovered, but apparently they're being reported all over the county. So kind of just chop weeds around where you want to transplant into, and then continue chopping the weeds as they grow up around the plant, and eventually you'll establish a little weedless space for the plant to grow. So in the future, things are going to be done completely differently. A serious learning experience, because like I preach, right, you want to be planting and harvesting the most. So if I'm fighting all of these weeds, then I have way less time for starting more seedlings and harvesting. So if I had laid the mulches just a little bit thicker, there wouldn't be as much weeds, but then it would have been that much more work up front, and I wouldn't have met my estimated time that I wanted to be done by. But maybe that's just a learning lesson of don't create unrealistic things that you want to accomplish for yourself. It wasn't really unrealistic, and anyways, stay tuned for more updates. So much love and wholeness, and I want to go take a quick look at the seedling tables with what, I got currants too. Currant cuttings that I rooted fall of 2022. They grew all last year, 2023, and now this year they'll put on fruit. Milkweed for the monarch butterflies. Leave all the milkweed. New England pie pumpkin down this whole row, actually around the whole border, from my own saved seed that I've been saving since 2021 and will continue to save. And then there's all mint in here, a spearmint, and there's actually strawberry plants. Where are you at, strawberries? Strawberry plants starting to put on their fruit. And tomatoes in this more protected shade area on this wood's edge with the river constantly running. I've noticed that tomatoes actually do better with a little bit of shade. These are a determinate variety that I'm trialing from Territorial Seeds out of Oregon, Something Grove, Oregon, and they Coralic and early red cherry, and they're both like a 50 to 60 day determinate tomato. So now that I've gotten this video documentation done, I gotta put all these seed trays into the little load tunnel because we're gonna get so much rain over the next 4 days. National 3 radish, the last round of New York early onions, bronze fennel, perfection bulb fennel. There is the Bellstar. There's lettuce, Bellstar broccoli, and solstice broccoli. Just starting to germinate. This is curly roja. Can't see it because it's purple. Curly roja kale and Brussels sprouts that I just potted up on the last leaf day. Fig that was gifted to me, and I did a little compost add and spring water flush, and it's looking really nice and green. $50 tomatoes, overwintered red Russian kale, saving seed off of, overwintered red Russian kale, saving seed off of. This kale just like resprouted and started putting on new growth, like not even going to seed, just putting on beautiful kale leaves. Swiss chard didn't germinate too well, but some is better than none. Medicinal cannabis. Lettuce. Can't really see because it's a purple variety. More tomatoes. More fennel. Okra. More tomatoes. 3 trays of cucumbers. And then some winter squash on the end there. Now, I don't even know if I'll have enough room for the rest of those trays to come back in here. And to be completely honest, with the last half of the garden looking all weedy, it doesn't really make sense to me to try and plant those transplants over there because the weeds are just too strong here right now. So maybe it would be a better idea to save all these transplants the longest I can in their trays until the garlic harvests, or we have these established wood chip beds where the lettuce is going to eventually phase out, and then we have the 3 potato beds that are going to harvest in early to mid-July, garlic around the same time, early to mid-July. So early, like 1st to 3rd week in July. So that's just one more month. So we could let these seedlings grow up for a month and then transplant into those mainly established weed-free beds. And that is a beautiful transition that I'm going to continue to work with on my next future farm. So one love, wholeness, peace and blessings. There's also some turnip, overwintered purple white top. What is it? Purple white top turnip. Some sunflowers, some calendula, cherry tomatoes just sitting, waiting for the ideal conditions, and another bed of potatoes. And I only got that section, first section done of the pasture. I don't know about finishing the rest of the half. We'll see what happens. One love, wholeness. Thank you everyone for all of your support so much, and this has been Jay's grass-fed garden expansion project, which transitioned into now the grass-fed farm. So one love and wholeness. Peace. Peace and blessings. Thank you for your support, and we'll see you on the next one.